both your friend and mine. So tell me, Dr. Squee, who's it gonna be this time? We like to hear you talk, but we love to hear you listen. And if you are not subscribed, you won't know what you're missing. So welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Headphones up, here we go.
Hello and welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. I'm Dr. Squee and this is my show. Please do not adjust your set. I am this color of red. It's just very hot here in the UK at the moment. Tonight, I am very honored with my guest. He's a composer, a music teacher. He performs music for silent films and has worked with some of the greats in comedy over a 50-year career. He has, however, probably been best known for providing the musical accompaniment on the stalwart Radio 4 anecdote to panel games, I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue. I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue always introduces my guest with some sort of insult about his musical prowess. Over 47 years, all those insults which have been faced. And that's just what the audience said about Colin's playing. Please welcome to the Dr. Squee Show, Mr. Colin Sell.
Thank you very much. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Hello. Good.
I mean, I'm a huge fan and I think your music's amazing, but it has to be a boyhood dream to insult Colin Sell about his music playing as a I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue fan.
I've had some wonderful insults over the years, actually, both from Humphrey Littleton and now Jack D, our hosts over the years. Do you want to hear some of them?
Oh, please.
I mean, I think there's a website out there anyway, as there almost certainly is for everything, but still, Colin Sell has perfect pitch. So if anybody's got a small garage roof they want fixing, Colin Sell's playing once made a blind man deaf. Colin Sell once produced 10cc, but the doctor said it wasn't enough and to try again with both taps running. And my absolute favorite is Colin Sell's playing can only be described.
I mean, it's one of those things. I think it's a lovely playground. I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue, where everyone gets equally insulted, so no one can be offended.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. Yes, we're all at the same level. And of course, when I joined in 1975, I was the junior. I was the terrified junior. I'd never done anything like that before, and I was whisked into it by the then producer Simon Brett, who saw me playing and heard my music up on the Edinburgh Fringe with Bristol University, and he just got me in to do this because they just transferred a few years before, in 1972, from doing I'm Sorry I'll Read That Again into doing this radio show, which they thought would be a lot easier to do because it wouldn't require very much writing, if any at all. But the pianist, unfortunately, had to leave. So suddenly I was given this job, and I did it for the first series. And I thought, oh, gosh, they'll never ask me back, because I was just felt I was in awe of everybody, really. And I was nobody. And the strange thing is I'm still there. I think they haven't rumbled me yet,
Well, I mean, I do want to get on to all those wonderful Clue stories, but I thought we'd take you back a little bit. And where did the love of music start for you? And where did you get your kind of earlier inspirations?
I got my love of music, but particularly playing the piano. My grandmother, she was the pianist in the family. And we used to have sing songs around the piano. And I didn't have any aspirations really about being a classical pianist. I thought, no, that's what I want to do. I want to do sort of light music, songs and stuff, which people would enjoy and sing along to. And then in my teens, I got into naughty old jazz, which of course has been very helpful because that's helped me sort of create, write, think on the spot. And that was very good training, really, even though it wasn't a proper formal training at all. And then I went to university and I didn't read music. I read Spanish and Latin American studies. I still read them from time to time and enjoy them very much. Ole, there we are, proves it to you. It's been a rather strange career altogether. I've been very, very lucky.
I mean, you touched upon something there, which I very much noticed. So, like, during Clue, if someone just goes, one which always sticks in my mind is Brook Taylor just going, "Could you play some music to suggest time passing?" And it's just that language of music that you instantly get, and you had something in the can ready to play. What kind of
Yes.
diet
Well,
of music do you consume to get that deep bench knowledge?
Well, I think you're keeping it as broad as possible, actually. I listen to a lot of music. I don't play it all, I must admit, but I do like listening to a great variety of music, particularly film, television, and radio, drama music. Excuse me, because from that you do get ideas. So if I'm playing, for example, for a silent film, you have to come up with something. You can't just let the air go dead. And so somewhere from the back of your brain, you manage to drag out something which will hopefully be right. It's not always right, but you get it as good as you can.
I was going to get onto your silent film work because I find that fascinating. So it sounds like from what you're saying, it is a lot of improvisation. I wasn't sure if you watched the films in advance and you prepared it.
Yeah, I think different people do it in different ways. Often people do play written scores. I saw somebody the other night playing a wonderful score for the 1922 film Nosferatu. I tend, and most of the people I sort of box and cox with doing music, I tend to make it up. But if I'm lucky, I might be able to see the film first. So at least I've got an idea of the order. But particularly, it's important if you're doing something like a comedy film. You see, they always give me the comedy films to do. This may come as a surprise to you, but they give me the comedy films because I work with red-nosed comedians, right? So,
yep.
Oh, Cole, you can do that. Well, actually, of course, they are very, very much of a you're on the spot because they're fast and furious, all that's going on all the time, and you've got to vary it a bit and play around with it. And by the way, everybody, that's a keyboard in front of me. I'm not playing my knees. That's actually a keyboard in front of me. It's just a case really of coming up with something, and sometimes it can be absolutely exhausting. I mean, if I play for like even just a sort of a quarter of an hour short silent comedy film, it can be very, very tiring. And sometimes the big dramatic films are a bit easier because they've kind of got longer, slower. You've got time to think, if you see what I mean. The worst thing, actually, if you want to know, the worst thing in a silent film is when, you have the intertitles with what they're saying written up on the screen for you, which gives you a bit of a chance, Oh, darling, I love you. You know where you are, But sometimes you get, and then they played the Romanian national anthem. And you think, oh, God, because, you might know the French, the English, you might be able to get away with busking your way through the Russian. But, I mean, there's no way that I'm going to know the Romanian national anthem. But you have to come up with something. So you play something which is going to be sort of like... you give it that sort of thing. But as sure as God made little green apples, that at the end of the performance, there's going to be somebody who will come up to you and say, that is not the Romanian national anthem,
Oh, I'm sorry I didn't have that one just to hand.
Exactly. Exactly.
Something very interesting that you were saying there. Sorry, what was I going to take up on? That's about, it just reminded me actually, bizarrely, I'm not trying to bring everything back to Clue because I do want to talk about these other areas of your career, but it just does remind me of there was a round which they played on the live one, which you played, which was to have, it was suddenly, they'd be telling a story, the other two panelists had to do the music along to it, and then they'd suddenly switch it like a bait and switch. So they'd set them up for one type of music and then do something. Have you ever had one of those moments during a silent film where you thought it was going one way and it's suddenly kind of like you've got to suddenly pitch it?
Oh, frequently. If it's not a film I know, and I think this has happened to all pianists who play for silent films, if you just think you've got into the feel of it, and it goes completely the opposite direction. I'll tell you a story that I heard Andre Previn tell. I don't think it wasn't about him. I think it was about his uncle, who had played in the 1920s for silent films somewhere in New York, and he was very, very good. He was sort of, a young protege and so on. And they got him in, and he was playing for this particular film, and he hadn't seen it before. And it was very avant-garde and very modern, and it kept switching from a very debauched Manhattan 1920s party, with everybody getting drunk and so on, to scenes from the Crucifixion. And it was just, he had to keep his eye on the screen all the time. And at one point, he got a bit carried away. He was busy playing the black and white rag for the party scene. And the next thing he knew was that the cinema owner had got him by the scruff of the neck and was dragging him out of the cinema up the aisle, because he'd managed to play the black and white rag all through the Crucifixion as well. You can get it wrong. You've got to watch that screen. Of course, when you're watching the screen, you've got to just trust you're going to hit the right notes, still.
See, I never thought that story was going to go the way of sacrilege. The minefields you go through. Were you a kind of big fan of silent film yourself, or is it just something you ended up doing?
I got into it mainly because I studied film. I used to, when I was teaching in a drama college, we had an actor-musician course, which is a 3-year degree course for people who were training to be actors, but also were training to use their own instrumental ability, their musicianship, to go into a company and provide music or write music or teach songs or whatever to the rest of the cast. And so we were running this course, and it's still running, actually. It's at Rose Bruford College, and it's a very good course. In those days, this is in the 1990s, and there wasn't very much filmed theatre drama. If you wanted to watch anything to do with music and drama, you had to watch a film. So I used to use, in those days, goodness me, it was video. How old-fashioned was that? I used to use video to demonstrate to the students, how music affects drama and vice versa. So that was very interesting. And I really got into film, and I thought this is very interesting. And I decided then that I would do some film studies, which I then did. And in the course of doing the film studies, we were all introduced to silent film, because obviously that's where it started, 1895 and so on and so forth. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it very much. And then I used to, I can't remember now what happened. I think somebody just took a punt on me one day and said, could I come and play for actually it was for D.W. Griffith's film, Birth of a Nation, which was originally, I think, about 4 hours long. This was a 2-hour version, which was quite long enough. I was exhausted at the end of it. But at least I found out I could sort of do it, The more you do it, the easier it gets.
You might be familiar with the Paul Merton show, which he did about silent
yes,
film.
absolutely.
Heroes of Silent Film. Sorry, Silent Heroes, pardon me.
Yeah.
He talked on there a lot about the fact that the reason why, when they used to show silent film it was usually on a weekend on BBC Two, and the reason why it didn't work is because it was missing that element of the live music. Like, how important was that to the experience?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Paul used to, I don't know if he still does, work with Neil Brand doing that. Neil Brand is an absolute master at playing for silent film, and he does it all over the world, and he's wonderful at it. Yes, it was very much an important part of your experience. You see, if you and I go and see a film now, a contemporary film, we have the same sort of experience. I mean, it might be slightly different depending on how comfortable the cinema seat is or who we're with, but basically, what we get is going to be exactly the same thing. But when you went to see a silent film in the old days, of course, you didn't have the same experience, because, for one thing, the musician or the musicians in the pit, depending how many you might have, might not know the film very well. So they might spoil the film for you by not playing the right music at the right place. So if you went to see the film, say, on a Monday, and the film had just arrived that day in the cinema, the musician or the musicians, it would be maybe just a pianist, or it might be a piano and violin, or if you were lucky, it might be a sort of 5 or 6 piece band, depending how much money your local cinema had. they would have seen the film run through once, so they wouldn't have known it very well. So that Monday afternoon or that Monday evening, you wouldn't have got a very good film for your money. But if you went to see it by the end of the week, they would really know the film well, and therefore you'd have a wonderful time, because by Friday night or Saturday afternoon or whatever, they'd be roaring away with it, and it worked very well. So it was actually a qualitatively different experience. And I think it's something we sort of forget now, because we just accept that everything coming off that screen and from those speakers is going to be exactly the same for everybody everywhere, because it wasn't. And there was, of course, in those early days of cinema, before sound came in, which is 1927, there was a big sort of symbiosis, if you like, between cinemas and local musicians, because the cinemas provided a lot of work for the local musicians. And if the local musicians were good at picking up the idea of a particular film, of course, then they'd be in work again the following week. So that worked very well. And in fact, some parts of the country couldn't afford to put sound systems into their cinemas because it was too expensive. So as late as 1935, there were still many musicians in many parts of the country still getting work for playing for silent films.
Wow, I can just imagine this conversation happening. It's like, shall we go for opening night? No. Give Kevin a little while to learn the music. Then we'll go on Wednesday. Yes, exactly. It'll be fine.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
That's great. Because now there's such a race to get there on the first day. It would have been the opposite.
Yes. I mean, you wouldn't want to go to the opening night of a film. The only way you would do that really was if it was a very big splashy film in a big splashy cinema in a big splashy town or city, and they might have an orchestra there with a pre-written score, specially composed score. And some of the big stuff, like I mentioned, D.W. Griffiths. I mean, all his big films, they all had specially written scores for a big orchestra. It still meant that in your local flea pit, your local pianist had to kind of busk something all the way through a 2 or 3 hour film, because a lot of those films are terribly long. They started off making films about 10-15 minutes long, the length of a reel of film, and then they went mad. The big feature films got into sort of 5, 6, 7 hour films. Tough on the instrumentalists.
Actually, I guess back then the spoiler used to mean an overly long film, which would just kill the pianist.
I think you had breaks and intervals and stuff, but I mean, to be honest, I think most of us would run out of ideas,
Yeah, definitely. I wouldn't know where to start. You mentioned about going into Clue. So obviously this it's established for 2 or 3 years by this stage.
Yeah, they did the pilot in 1972. Graham Garden said, look, it's getting really hard work writing something funny every week from Sorry I'll Read That Again. So let's do a panel program, which we kind of improvise, which actually did terrify some of the members of I'm Sorry I'll Read That Again, and they didn't actually stay with it. But the idea was quite a good one. They did the pilot in 1972, and the first, that was the first show they ever did, and it wasn't very successful. Everybody was very nervous, and nobody quite knew what to do with it. But David Hatch, the producer, said he said, well, we'll put it out on Boxing Day when everybody's drunk anyway, so nobody knows. But strangely enough, the BBC came back and then wanted a series. So that was in 73, another series 74. And then they lost their pianist. He had to go, I don't know, he was working somewhere else. I don't know what he was doing. And so that's when Junior Sell joined. And I was terribly lucky. I couldn't believe, that I was doing this. I was working with these great heroes. I mean, in the 60s, I worshipped Humphrey Lyttelton, the great jazz trumpeter. There he was in the chair. Two of the goodies, Graham and Tim, one of the great comedians and scriptwriters, Barry Cryer, and the wonderful man from satire, really, Willie Rushton. And I was really too frightened just to touch the keys. Horrendous.
Do you think maybe it was that? I think it was that broad background. They all came from different areas, which just really made it something special.
Yes, I think so. I think the fact that they were all kind of into middle age by then, really, and therefore they could play this game of being sort of slightly sexist older men, which was kind of what the show was at the time. It's he can't do that now, but he did it then, and it sort of worked, I think, on those lines. And I think also Humph was very clever. Well, he didn't try to be clever. He just did it automatically. He just pretended he didn't want to be there.
Yes.
He would much rather, actually, he said himself, I would much rather be doing my jazz program than doing this nonsense, And people used to come up to him in the street and say, oh, I did enjoy your program this week. And then he discovered they weren't talking about the jazz program. They were talking about I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue, which really rather annoyed him. But I got on very well with Hump because of the jazz interest. You see, that was the thing. That was the big link between us.
Yeah, would you talk about music, and would you play between the scenes?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get a chance to play piano and accompany him very much on the trumpet. There were a few occasions when I did, which was an absolute joy and a privilege to do. But I did know that in the 1950s he'd been very instrumental in getting American jazz musicians over here. And of course, a lot of them I had seen when they come over, and I kind of benefited from that. So if we had a quiet moment together, we'd often just sit and talk about jazz and jazz musicians, because he played with all the greats, when they came over. And he was actually charming man altogether. He had wonderful sort of coolness about him. Did you know the Samantha Story?
No, I don't know where she came from originally.
I'll tell you the Samantha Story, though. Some of your viewers might know. What happened was, we had this beautiful score of Samantha, who's much talked about on the program.
Yeah, I've seen the show live once, and I can't even describe her.
That's a very good way of putting it. Yes. Anyway, Humph was doing a gig with his band one night, and a man came up to him afterwards looking very serious, and Humph thought, oh dear, perhaps he didn't like the music. But not at all. This man said, Mr. Littleton, he said, may I ask you a question in strictest confidence? And Humph said, yes, of course you can. And this man, perfectly true, this man said, do Colin Sell and Samantha really exist? I don't know who he thought was playing the piano. And so Humph looked him straight in the eye and said, well, Samantha does. And the man went away perfectly happy.
I knew it was coming, but I was waiting for you to say it. Oh, that is delicious.
Yes.
Just to put it in context, by the way, I'm sure any listeners who are very familiar with Clue will know this, but for anyone who wasn't aware of Humph's jazz playing, Louis Armstrong was quoted as saying, "Oh, he's that British cat who swings his ass off." Louis Armstrong, that's not bad.
Yes, it's not bad. No, exactly. Yeah. And Humph was still doing it right up to the end of his life. He was out with the band playing, and he ran a very good band. And he also, he got a lot of young people, young new jazz players into the band as well, which kept it very lively. And they were just terrific, all of them. And he was blowing hard right up to the end. God bless him. Yeah, he's great. Yeah.
I seem to remember, I think it was the last Christmas special that he was in, but at the end they just Humph in Wonderland, I think it was.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
He got his band up, and he goes, right, let's show them how it should be done, and that's how you ended the show, and it was so amazing. It was just wonderful playing, but just also to include that side of Humph, which he didn't bring into Clue that often.
Well, no, because he played the whole thing as if he didn't want to be there. It's a wonderful character he created for himself. And I think, although Jack does it completely differently, there's an element in Jack as well, Jack D, that also has a sort of curmudgeonly side to it, which is rather fun to be with, particularly when he's insulting me. He'll just turn around and hurl abuse at me. It's great. Well,
I was lucky enough that when the show came back for the first series after Humph died, they had a actually no, so I've supposed to have seen once with Humph, once with Jack, because when they brought it back for that series where they had guest hosts for 2 episodes for that series, I happened to catch the Mayflower, Jack being the host for those 2, so I got to see his first performance as host. And it was really just this wonderful mix, because he did a great job right off the bat, but you could tell he was visibly nervous stepping into Humph's shoes, as anyone would be. And I think he was the first host, or he might have been the second.
Well, that's it. It was interesting because when Humph died, we all assumed that the BBC would then just cut the program, because that's what they tend to do. The chance of getting rid of something, particularly something which involved older people, because they want to appeal all the time to younger people. So we thought, okay, well, that was that, and that was fun, but there we are. And then the BBC got in touch with John Naismith, our producer, and said, look, emails are flooding in. You know, people want the program back. Is there anything you can do? So John Naismith, I think, very cleverly tried out 3 people on the series. He tried out Stephen Fry and Rob Brydon and Jack Dee, and they're all very good. Of course they were, you know, and they'd all done the show. But I don't think Jack had actually been on the team before. I don't think he'd actually done the show. Anyway, but Jack was the one, because he had that sort of, oh God, do I really have to do this quality about him?
I seem to remember he did guest once, because to begin with, he said something which got misquoted or, you know, misinterpreted, because he said on one interview, just remember, sorry, this is, I did go a little bit deeper, and I'm sorry, I haven't a clue, but there was, I'm sorry, I haven't, a desert island, where they just had clips of people talking about their favorite moments from Clue. And I remember him saying, oh, to begin with, I said no to it because I said in this interview, oh, the one show I don't want to do is I'm sorry, I haven't a clue. And what he meant was because I would be worried I'd ruin it. But he didn't say that. So when this went out, he was mortified. And, you know, and then later on, I think he did end guesting once before he was the host.
I didn't know that. Didn't know that story. That's interesting. Yes, he certainly has made up for it since anyway. Yes. No, we all like Jack. He's very good. And I think what's interesting about him is, I think it's the same for his stage show as well, his one-man show, is that when he puts the suit on, he always has a suit and usually wears a tie as well. That's his character. And he becomes Mr. Grumpy and sort of, you know, sort of chucking out insults at everybody. But the rest of the time, until that moment, he's very matey and he's good fun to be with. And it's very interesting. And I was talking to Barry Cryer about this. And because in his early days, Barry worked a few times with Max Miller. And he said Max Miller did exactly the same thing, even on radio. He would still wear the wallpaper suit, the +4s, the big hat. He said, because it's the character. He said, I can't work in ordinary clothes. And I think Jack's the same, actually. It's the clothes that make the character.
Oh, that's marvelous. I would like to talk about just a few of the wonderful performers that we've lost who were in Clue. We'll talk about Willie Rushton and Barry Cryer in just a bit, because you did work with them separately as well. Tim Brook Taylor. Actually, it's kind of a weird symmetry, because the first show I did of the Dr. Squee show, I got to interview him at the Sci-Fi Ball in Southampton, where he was guesting, and he was doing, I'm sorry, I'll read that again.
Yes.
And it was actually just a few weeks, unfortunately, before he passed away from COVID, just before the pandemic really hit. So we're actually just heading towards the 100th show. So to have you on is a kind of an amazing symmetry for me. But what was it like working with Tim?
Oh, I got on very well with Tim. Yes, he always got very nervous. But I think that sort of fired his performance. But I just found him delightful to work with. And every time he did a song and he got a big round of applause at the end, he always turned around and indicated me at the piano, which I thought was very generous of him altogether, because I hadn't done much. I just tried to follow him, you know. But he was big-hearted like that, actually. And yes, it was a real terrible shame that we lost him. It was if we'd closed the country down a week earlier, you know, we wouldn't have gone to Huddersfield and done a recording. He wouldn't have caught COVID, and many of us caught it. I caught it as well, but obviously not as badly. But that was unfortunately the end of him, and it's a great loss.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, when I saw him there, he was so still full of life. He was firing all thrusters performance-wise. And I think something you've said there does chime, because I always felt that he was very selfless about the laugh. So he would set himself up for so many jokes to be the kind of the person who would be the foil. As someone who sounds a little bit posh, he even spoke about it, the fact they had a double-barreled surname. So he'd set himself up as the posh buffoon kind of character, which was, I think, very giving as a comedian.
Yes, I agree. I think that was his great skill. Yes, he knew how to send himself up. He knew he spoke proper, as it were. And as you say, he had a double-barreled surname and everything. I think it a lot of what he did, he discovered when he was doing the Goodies. Because when you look at the old Goodies programs, a lot of it in that he's the foil for everybody else. He's the silly one, and he's the one who always dresses up, you know, as a woman. He's always doing the female parts and so on. it makes him look even sillier with the wig and the dress on. And I think he found that a very helpful persona, to find his way through. Yeah, we all miss him. Yeah.
Okay. And well, up until the point where this man joined the show, you were the most known for the music on I'm Sure I Haven't a Clue. Then Jeremy Hardy blew that all out of the water.
Oh gosh, yes. You see, the thing about Jeremy was that actually he just had never sung before. I found this with many, when I've, over the years, I've taught many young people who are training to be actors, many drama students. And this happens a great deal. People think they can't sing. But there are very, very few people that I've come across who really are tone deaf. And Jeremy wasn't one of them. Jeremy could sing all right. He just had never done it. So he wasn't used to hearing himself make these strange noises, which is the beauty of it. As time went on, he got used to hearing himself and tended to sing in key. So he used to kind of cheat it a bit, and then if he wasn't cheating it enough, I would sort of rehearse the song in one key, but when we came to record it, I'd do it in a higher key just to put him off. There was a lovely moment when we had Linda Smith on the show, and Jeremy wasn't on it at that time, and she was on the show, and she hadn't been on it before. And just before she sang for the first time, she said, "I must warn you, ladies and gentlemen, I'm no Jeremy Hardy." She was lovely.
Wonderful. And well, Linda Smith was the other one I was going to mention. There's your two for one right there.
I'm afraid, yes, that was very sad. I also worked with her on her radio show. I think I think it was called A Short History of Time Wasting. It was some sort of zany title like that, and I did one of those, and that was great fun to do. The person I was really nervous about coming on the show was Victoria Wood, because of course she was a great pianist, songwriter, and everything else, and I thought, oh dear, she could be, she could give me a tough time, and quite right too. But she didn't. She was absolutely as nice as pie and a delight to work with. Again, very, very sad we lost her. What is it about these people? Ian, are you feeling all right? Because
I think I'm all right for the moment. We'll see how I'm doing after this.
They tend to have a habit of passing away. There we are.
I mean, the only dying I've done is when an interview's gone all right. But apart from that, I think I'm all right.
Oh, we've all done that, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Well, we were talking there about kind of some of the people who've come and gone through the Clue doors, if you will, over the years. Was there any conversation about, especially now where it's just you and Graham from the original lineup left, was there any conversation about having kind of new series regulars at all? No,
I don't think specifically. I mean, I don't know what goes on behind closed doors. I mean, for all I know, they may have been trying to get rid of me for years. I mean, but there's a pool.
I didn't mean in place of you and Graham. I meant additionally. Sorry, just to make that clear.
Well, there is a pool now. There's a pool of people who've done the show a lot who are very strong. And John Naismith, I think, tends to go to that pool quite regularly to get people to do it. And I think it's very healthy. You see, when Willie Rushton died in 1996, it doesn't seem that long ago to me, but it was 1996. I mean, it was heartbreaking to lose Willie. And I was very close to Willie because we had a common interest in drawing, sketching, cartooning. And he also, of course, was doing a show at the time with Barry, which I was playing for. And it was very, very tough. But the only one advantage, if you can call it that, of Willie leaving us was the fact that we had to get a replacement, and we found in the end it was best to get different replacements for each program or each pair of programs, which meant we were getting young people come in, which meant we brought in a younger audience, and I think that younger audience has been very healthy for the program, and I think the fact we've still got younger people coming into it has been a very good thing.
Well, I'll share something with you, which I don't know if you've ever heard, but it's something I shared with Tim, and he seemed very delighted with this. Was when, I'm going to forget his name from Never Mind the Buzzcocks, Phil Jupitus, of course. When
yes,
Phil Jupitus,
yes, yeah.
When he guested, his statement on being on Clue was, it's like being called up when the Stones are on tour to play drums for them.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the regard in which the program
It
sees.
was, yes, he was lovely, and I have to say I don't know why he hasn't been asked back, or what, maybe he's just not been available, because he was very good and he was very good value and he was delight to work with. Yes, he did. He said that we'd finished recording and he said to the audience, "I just want to tell you now," he said, "that I've been listening to this program for most of my life, and this is this is such a thrill to be here." And we're all sitting there, sort of tears in our eyes, and it was very moving, and it was absolutely genuine and heartfelt.
Oh, that's amazing. You mentioned it there with Willie Rushton and Barry Cryer. They performed their two-man show, Two Old Farts in the Night, which was amazingly named.
Yeah. Well, Willie said, it's a good title, he said, because they can't do us under the Trades Description Act.
I was always, and still am to this day, endlessly impressed of what I'm sorry I haven't a clue gets away with at 6 o'clock on the radio on a Monday night.
Yes.
It's amazing. Yeah, I mean, what was the tour like and working with those guys?
It was enormous fun to do. I mean, I was so lucky to get there because it was obviously it was a spin-off from the radio show, and I never thought anything like that would happen. And Willie and Barry were asked originally to do a charity show, which was being sponsored by Taylor's Port, and this is a big thing. I think it was up at Leeds, actually. It was in Barry's hometown, they said, would I play for it? And I said, gosh, yes, rather, and so we did. We had a wonderful night doing that. And then Barry and Willie thought, well, we could do this as a tour, as a stage show, and which we did, because it just absolutely packed them in, and it made wonderful fun to do. Willie was a great one for not rehearsing. You didn't sort of notice this in the show but he and Barry only came together at the very end of the show when they did censored songs. You use a bleeper to take out words, otherwise it would be rude. I could have all night, I could have all that sort of. So they did that as a grand finale. The rest of the time, it was Barry would come on first and do his stuff, and then Willie would come on and then he'd do his stuff and so on. And so he kind of boxed and coxed, and we had guests as well and so on. But people didn't notice, they didn't spend much time together on stage because Willie didn't really like rehearsing very much. He also, you just mentioned the fact that the stuff that Clue gets away with saying, Willie had no fear about what he said. And we were in the Isle of Man, in that lovely Frank Matcham Theatre in Douglas, in the Isle of Man. And Willie marched on stage and beamed at this packed house, and he said, as Oscar Wilde said, it's terrific to be in Douglas. And Barry and I sort of thought, oh gosh, but the audience just loved it. They thought it was terribly funny. He could just get away with that sort of thing. Can I tell you a story about him not wanting to rehearse?
Please do.
Right. He didn't like rehearsing. And so for him to do a regular gig like Two Old Farts in the Night was a gift, because all he had to do was turn up, put on the suit, go on stage and do it, right? Excuse me, I need some water. Looks like water, doesn't it? Now.
Yeah. Here's to the vodka or gin.
Yeah, exactly. So he got a gig every year at the Old Mermaid Theatre in Puddle Dock in Blackfriars in London, in Treasure Island. The theatre was run by Bernard Miles, and Bernard Miles used to play Long John Silver every year, and so this was a kind of regular thing. And Willie had this every year playing Squire Trelawney, right? And he didn't need to really do much rehearsing. He just used to turn up, do the dress rehearsal, and then they get on with it and do the run of the show. And he's on stage one night, just before Long John Silver comes on. And it's his job in the script, Squire Trelawney's job, to set up Long John Silver. And he's talking to Dr. Livesey. Dr. Livesey is played by a fine old actor named Eric Flynn. And so Willie's on stage talking about Long John Silver. And he said, oh, yes, a scourge of the high seas and of the Spanish main, used to be a ship's cook, and now can have he can wield a wonderful cutlass. He's got a parrot on his shoulder. And he knew he'd missed something out, and he couldn't think what it was. And he eventually sort of ground to a halt in the middle of the stage. And Eric Flynn then gave him one of the world's greatest prompts. He said, this Long John Silver, he said, how many legs has he got? And Willie said, well, you being a medical man, of course, you'll be interested to know he's only got one leg. And of course, it was just a wonderful prompt to give him. And there must have been better ways, surely, of pointing out the fact that Long John Silver only had one leg.
Yeah.
It's great. And Willie used to tell that as a story against himself, because he knew he didn't like rehearsing, and he could quite easily forget his lines.
Amazing.
And then so we started doing that in 1994,
I believe.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. No. 2 Old Farts. It said 94 when I looked it up.
Oh no, we started before that, because then I think about 91 or 92. Then Barry started doing his one-man show, and he said, "Would I play for it?" And I said, "Gosh, yes." And that was great fun. We always had a good show, and sometimes we travel a long way because obviously Barry wasn't going to be as big a pull as Barry and Willie together, so we weren't playing such big theatres. We played smaller places. He could fill a 600, 700 seater. Playing art centres and so on. It did mean we were going around the country quite a lot, to quite small venues, and you'd often think, oh gosh, this is a long way to go, but it always was worthwhile. People were always pleased to see us. He always did a good show, and he died in January of this year being 2022. Yeah. And he died. He was still working last autumn. He was still doing shows, not such long shows. He was just doing afternoons and just doing an hour and so on. But he was still doing it and giving good value, and he became a very close friend.
I mean, I know all of these gents have worked with the great and the good, but Barry Cryer just seems like one of those. He worked with everyone from year dot to the newest comedians. He was still invested in new comedians coming through as well, which I found amazing.
Yeah, absolutely right. He unlike many older comedians, he had no jealousy. He had no insecurity around young comedians. He promoted them. He encouraged them. He'd go and see their shows. He was always going up to the Edinburgh Fringe to perform himself, but then he'd go and see everybody else's shows. And to them, he was just Uncle Baz. He was Uncle Barry, and he did support, and quite right too. He knew who the good people were. And then eventually, a lot of them, when they got bigger and more famous, they come on to, I'm sorry, I haven't a clue. And so they already had a friend there. They already had Barry there. He was very generous like that, very big-hearted, and he loved people. He wasn't just showbiz people. He knew everybody in showbiz, that's true, but he liked everybody. He would be quite happy to talk to people in pubs or at bus stops or whatever. He just was interested in other people.
Yeah, I heard him in a few interviews where he would say about the people who he used to write with, and he'd be so complimentary about how, because when someone would say that, I mean, he even addressed it, brought it up. He'd say, it's like, oh, people say that I'm a great writer. It's like, no, I will accept I've worked with the best and everything, but he would never take the compliment himself. So now he's dead. We can compliment him all we want. So he was amazing. I really think he underestimated how subversive and how just out and out funny some of the stuff which he'd come up with was. Yes. He said that he said, I didn't write. He said, we wrote for people, because it's true. He did normally write in the team, but then if you talk to teams of script writers, they have their own roles within that team. And he was the gags man. Somebody else would work out the sort of the shape of the scene or the script or whatever, but he would do the gags. And of course, he had gags for every occasion. And what was great about the man, I thought, was that he didn't force this on you socially. If you're in a social situation, he would be happy to talk about, the quality of the beer or or what people like to eat or what their interests were. But if you wanted him to tell jokes, he would. But so many comedians feel they've got to do it all the time. They're sort of as if they're performing all the time. But he didn't do that. He didn't need to. He had too much class for that, I think. Very well put. Now, we were talking about the fact that you worked with Barry and Willie on their 2 Old Farts tour. One thing which I always remember from that, which I mentioned to you the other day, was you playing Boys in the Band as part of that night. And you said you might be able to tinkle the ivories for us tonight. Oh, yeah. All right. Well, I have to say, I wrote this back in the 1970s for a late night review, which was sending up the theatre and sending up working in the theatre. What little rogues we were in the 1970s, weren't we? So it's not perhaps as woke as it might be,
But anyway, it's called The Boys in the Band. I normally preface this with a story about a drummer and a guitarist having a conversation. And the drummer says, "Oh, but it's pretty easy playing the guitar." And the guitarist said, "Well, it's probably pretty easy playing the drums." He said, "I'll tell you what," he said, "you go away and buy a guitar and practice for a couple of weeks, and I'll go away and buy a drum kit and practice for a couple of weeks, and we'll come back together and we'll see who can play what." "All right," "All right," said the drummer. So the guitarist goes into the shop and he buys a drum kit and a hi-hat and cymbals and sticks and brushes and goes away well pleased. And the drummer goes into the shop and he says, "I want an electric guitar." And the man says, "You're a drummer, aren't you?" He said, "How do you know?" He said, "This is a fish and chip shop." So
Excellent. Well, I'm going to remove myself from the stream for a second so we can concentrate just on your wonderful music. But ladies and gentlemen, on the piano, Mr. Colin Sell.
Oh, we are the boys who make all the noise before the show's about to begin. Oh, we are the lads, the jokers and cads, whose diet is a riot of Dubonnet and gin. Oh, we are the flute, root toot toot toot, the saxes, trumpets, double bass, and piano and drums all sat on our bums. For we are the boys in the band, 2, 3, 4, first in the bar. Ha 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 ha! Whenever there's a break in the show, we worry MDs, we've all got DTs. We're always late arriving and the first ones to go. Though we know the score, we like to score more with chorus girls who soon understand. We may be the dregs, but we know about legs, for we are the boys in the band. Squash into the pitch, we have to rough it. On occasions, we be known to fluff it. We just tell the flipping cast to stuff it. Play another chorus, Freddie, till I've got the bottles ready. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Do me so do. We're making more dough than all the prima donnas in the cast. Move it along, rip through the song. There's nothing like a tango when you play it too fast. We are the Burks, the fumblers and jerks. We always knock our parts off the stand. Whoops, sorry. So pass us a cig and on with the gig. For we are the boys in the playing with toys in the. We are the boys in the band. Take it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And encore. What a long afternoon this could be, ladies and gentlemen. This is called Vamp Till Ready. Ready, we are the crowd who play far too loud. We never give the singers a chance. We never stay with them, we lose every rhythm. And yesterday the drummer threw up during the dance. Name any key, we only know 3. We never play with more than one hand. Yoo-hoo! We're on pleasure bent, so nuts to the tempo. We are the boys in the playing with toys in the. We are the boys in the band. Take it!
Come on now. That's
I realised
amazing.
the screen was wobbling quite a lot, wasn't it? I'm sorry about that. I've got my laptop on a box on top of a laundry basket, and it's it was all shaking. Anyway,
not a problem. I really only took myself off the stream so no one had to watch my awful dad dancing. Oh, and Willow should come up to say hello at this point. So, getting back to yourself, sir, you also did a one-man show. How do you start to put a narrative behind your own life and career?
Yes, well, I did two one-person shows, actually. I did one about British comedy film called Laughter in the One and Nines. And then I did, one about me and music and comedy and really my sort of background in Clue as well. That was called Clueless at the Keys. And I think I just made a list, actually, Ian. I just made a list of stuff that I wanted to do, songs, stories, anecdotes, a few jokes. And because people ask me a great deal about doing, I'm sorry, I haven't a clue, and they think I don't do anything else. But of course, I do other things, but I suppose that in terms of sort of the public eye, it's my mainstay. And so people want to know the sort of the background stories and so on. Actually, most of the funny stuff really only happens at the microphone when we record it, because backstage we're all too nervous to be funny, I think. But there's some quite nice stuff that comes out, particularly from in terms of the spin-offs, having done, started doing, I'm sorry, I haven't a clue, in, what did I say, 1975, people then associated me with playing for comedy shows and being able to play anything, which I can't do. I can't play anything, actually. But people thought I could. So I used to get asked to do all sorts of variety nights and things like that, which is very nice. And those I could manage. I always used to say no. Somebody wanted me to turn up and play Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto. I'd say, I don't think so. Whereas other stuff, the lighter stuff, I'm quite happy with. So it kind of built from that, really. And I used to do Boys in the Band as part of the show because I felt that was sort of relevant, really. Because I worked a great deal as a musical director around the provinces, particularly in the 70s and 80s. And I got to know what it was like being in the pit and working with different musicians, and how much fun they can be, but also how very difficult they can be as well. Not because they're difficult people, it's simply that it's very tiring doing a show, particularly doing a pantomime. Yeah. When you're doing a pantomime, you're doing 2 shows a day. You get to about Wednesday and you're going mad, really, with the best will in the world, no matter how good the show is. And it takes a particular mentality to get through it. I think I can do that. I think I've got this sort of mentality. But just occasionally I book the wrong person. I get a very, very good musician, but it'd be a musician who was used to doing recording, used to going into a studio. And therefore doing 2 shows a day with the same material all the way through, it wouldn't really suit that particular person. So sometimes they would get a bit bored. I can quite understand that. I think the most fun I've had actually with musicians has been doing music for radio plays, which I used to do a great deal of. And the great treat about that, Ian, was that a recording session for radio, you could get anybody, you could get the best there was in the country. If they were free on that Wednesday morning, say between 10 and 1 o'clock, they'd come and do it, and so you could write for the best. I'm not saying my writing was up to their standard of playing, but you knew that whatever you put in front of them, they'd be able to play it. And that was just wonderful. I really enjoyed that. And I think that sort of area has now really gone, very largely because people now expect musicians to compose, or composers to compose at home on their laptops or whatever, and that's fine. That's the way it goes. I can quite see that. But I do really like working with real musicians, playing real instruments. Very old-fashioned, but that's the way I am, I'm afraid.
Oh no, that's absolutely wonderful. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention any musician, performer, whatever, wants to perform at the Royal Albert Hall. And recently, Clue got to perform the Albert Hall for its 50th anniversary, which it's celebrating this year.
Yes, we did. Yes.
How amazing.
It was absolutely packed too, which was wonderful. I don't know how we swung that one. I don't know how John Naismith managed to get us to the Royal Albert Hall. But it was wonderful. I had a dressing room, which was, bigger than this room that I'm in now, with a piano. It was just fantastic, and we were very well looked after altogether. Unfortunately, I was going to be playing a piano which had been played by the absolute top pianists in the world, which was a bit humbling, to say the least. You get to a point where suddenly your fingers start to do that.
Yeah, everyone who's been the great and the good for hundreds of years has played this piano. No pressure whatsoever.
Absolutely not. No.
Well, I spoke there about the kind of the history of Clue, it being 50 years old this year. Yeah. It's got to the point, as we've already mentioned, that it's kind of now almost a generational show with new people joining the show all the time as kind of guest performers. What do you owe to the longevity of the show?
Well, I think, gosh, that's a difficult one because I'm inside it, and it's hard to tell. It's certainly very well produced. I mean, our producer, John Naismith, has been with us for well over 30 years now, and he does all the editing. He records a lot of stuff, a lot of material for each program, and he's a very, very clever editor, and he knows how to make a good show out of it. I think it's partly its history, is part of its attraction, actually, the tradition. You know that this is a fun show, and it's been a fun show since 1970, whenever it was. And I think also the fact you've got younger people coming into it has also helped. And yet at the same time, it's still got the older people. It's still got me. It's got, well, Jack isn't that old, but, you know, he's kind of a middle age, shall we say. Graham, of course, is older as well. And so it's got quite a nice, quite a healthy mix. And I think the great thing about it is that young comedians, they want to be on it. I mean, Jeremy Hardy wanted to be on it for years before he actually managed to get onto it, which was very flattering. And when he came on, because he fitted in perfectly, it was wonderful. And he, of course, he brought his own audience. And I think that's something else about it, is that not all young people want to do the young thing when it comes to entertainment. I think sometimes something old-fashioned, like a radio show where you sit down at tables and you just, you partly improvise and you have some rehearsed stuff as well. And it's all very silly. And it doesn't matter if it goes wrong. That's the beauty of it, I think. Yes. Stephen Fry, we have him on it occasionally, and he's just wonderful value. And I love Stephen. He's very, very good, very funny, very, very quick. But he doesn't like singing. He hates the singing. And I say to him every time, I say, Stephen, it doesn't matter. There are very few people come on this show who can sing. He just has a sort of complete, you know.
Yes, he's talked about this a few times.
I can understand that, you know. But
yeah.
Sorry.
No, I was just saying Stephen Fry's talked about it publicly quite a lot, about his uncomfortable relationship with music.
Yes. I don't know why he does. His voice is all right. He's not tone deaf. He can sing all right, you know. I mean, he's not going to be a sort of in a Cameron McIntosh West End musical, obviously. But, you know, but who is?
Well, Colin, I did want to wrap this up by just saying in personal kind of remembrance, because I used to listen to Clue with my dad, and he brought the tapes when they came up. And he was a pharmacist, and he was a very busy man. He owned a few shops and ran the pharmacy himself. And he was also on local councils and all this kind of thing. So it was kind of like precious time when I got to kind of go on deliveries with him around our town of Romsey, where I come from. And yeah, we'd always have, I'm sorry I haven't Clue on the car. It was just a wonderful bonding experience. And I know that was the case for a lot of people. So just thank you to you and everyone else behind Clue for 50 years, longer than I've been on this planet worth of entertainment. Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure. I mean, I'm very happy, and you put me in a position now of sort of representing it. I would just add to what you very kindly said about listening to it in the car, is that the actor Jim Broadbent, I think he put it rather well. He said, I will get out of the bath to turn off the archers, but I will stay in the car at the end of a long journey to listen to the end of I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue, which I thought was very generous.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. And by the way, you and Graham have to just be kept in perspex from now on. We can't lose any more of you. That's all I'm going to say.
Don't worry, I feel perfectly all right. Yes.
Yeah, excellent. I felt, you were joking about like me dying after this interview. I was worried, like I just met Tim. Like I'm perfectly healthy. Yeah. I haven't got it. You know, I'm good.
Yes.
So thank you very much, Mr. Colin Sell. Have an absolutely wonderful week, and here's to another 50 years of Clue.
Thank you. Nice to see you, Ian. All the best. Take care.
Thank you. I've been Dr. Squee. That was my show. In a world where you can be literally anything, please be kind.